A woman known for flawless French elocution, a radiant record in humanitarian work, and top-tier access to Burkina Faso's most restricted areas is suddenly restrained by President Ibrahim Traoré himself, on live television. But the shock isn't the arrest. It's what she whispers into his ear, and the way he stiffens. Claire Morrow wasn't just another NGO darling. She was something else, something far more dangerous. When she landed in Ouagadougou, she looked like she belonged. Sunlight danced off her credentials, emblazoned with the logo of a Parisian nonprofit known for aiding war-traumatized populations. Within a week, she was in field clinics, distributing medicine, comforting orphans, and chatting in flawless Moor that left tribal elders speechless. Soldiers dubbed her the French woman with a Burkinabe heart. Children clung to her. Grieving wives confided in her. She moved too easily. Access to high-security areas was granted without hesitation. Military families invited her to cookouts. Injured troops opened up to her like she was clergy. After a rebel ambush left a platoon decimated near the Mali border, Claire was there, hours before international aid arrived. But behind the soft gaze and humanitarian glow, rumors brewed. Her birth records were murky. The NGO listed Lyon as her birthplace. Yet, the French embassy held no such file. An Interior Ministry inquiry was launched. The reply? Delayed. Redacted. During tea at a colonel's home, a wife noted Claire had stopped by just before a botched attempt on the colonel's life. Odd coincidence, they chuckled. Until another officer's spouse went pale. Captain Yarrow, Burkina Faso's head of internal intelligence and a longtime confidant of Traoré, started a quiet investigation. What he discovered wasn't illegal. It was unsettling. Claire hadn't concealed a past. She had erased it. No digital trail, no identifiable history beyond press photos and soft-focus interviews. Yarrow dropped the dossier on the president's desk. Traoré didn't speak. But that day he cleared his entire calendar. Then came the Arbinda raid. A rebel leader, known only as Mahamud, had managed to elude every trap for over 2 years. His jungle camp was obliterated by an aerial strike, just days after Claire's team had delivered aid. People shrugged. Rebels fall every day. War is war. But it happened again. A shelter near Djibo, housing nomads suspected of aiding insurgents, was annihilated shortly after Claire's humanitarian visit. She had laughed with women, taken notes, snapped pictures. Pictures that never appeared online. Yarrow reviewed the data. Every location she touched was compromised. Some obliterated, others exposed. Insurgents who had dodged surveillance for years were suddenly hunted with uncanny precision. And Claire? Untouched. Her convoys never ambushed. Her paths never mined. At first, the military blamed internal leaks. But encrypted channels showed no breach. That's when Yarrow's stomach dropped. What if she wasn't gathering intelligence, but feeding it? Her NGO devices, laptop, sat phone, tablet, could relay data in the background without raising flags. Claire wasn't collateral risk. She was a strategic lure. Yarrow brought the theory to Traoré. The president stared at a wall map, finger hovering over the next rebel stronghold. Claire was due to visit that village in 48 hours. His voice was flat steel. Pull audio from her room. I want every call logged. At sundown near Dori, a military truck carrying injured men struck an IED. The route was confidential. Only 4 individuals had access. Claire had met with 2 of them that morning. Smiling, attentive, asking for timetables. Yarrow arrived at the smoking wreck hours later. The scent of scorched fuel and blood hovered. One young soldier was sprawled against a tree, fingers locked around a melted radio. Yarrow didn't need confirmation anymore. This wasn't coincidence. It was methodical. Claire had left the city earlier, citing a sudden shift in her itinerary. Her driver confirmed it. So did hotel security. But a satellite ping placed her nearby, just 15 minutes before the blast. That night, in his private suite, Traoré received the final report. He didn't speak. He walked his study floor, gripping the magazine on his desk. The cover bore Claire's smiling face under the caption, Africa's Angel. He flipped it over in silence. Later, Yarrow waited at the palace gate. Traoré emerged alone, face granite hard, coat in hand. He brought no aides, no security detail, just a verdict that could reshape the nation. "If she moves again," he said, climbing into the vehicle. "We follow." Yarrow, hand on the wheel, asked the question still eating at him. "Do we arrest her for what she's done, or for who sent her?" At Bobo Dioulasso International, the usual chaos buzzed. Vendors haggled. Aid workers in crisp shirts hurried through security. Claire Morrow walked calmly through it all, her scarf pristine, passport ready. She greeted the guard with an easy smile. Behind her, 2 plainclothes officers tracked every step. Captain Yarrow stood behind one-way glass, speaking quietly into his headset. President Traoré waited outside in a dark SUV, unmoving. The team had strict orders. No disruption. No headlines. But when her suitcase passed through customs, that changed. Inside the lining, a satellite uplink module, military-grade encryption, and a counterfeit UN ID, flawless forgery. "She's not aid," Yarrow muttered. "She's covert." The moment she reached the jetway, they moved. One man blocked her path. Another seized her wrist. Claire didn't scream, didn't fight, just turned, meeting Yarrow's gaze with an expression that bordered on amused. "This is a mistake," she said gently. Then came the shock. President Traoré emerged from the SUV. Alone. He walked across the tarmac, coat unbuttoned, jaw clenched. He stopped in front of her. No words, no cameras, just silence and breath. Claire leaned in, whispering something only he could hear. "You're not the only one who's been deceived." Traoré flinched, just once, and the future tilted. Thick with something unsaid then. His tone flat, final, "Bring her in." Claire sat steady in the holding room. Beneath the presidential compound, her hands free, her stare unwavering. The walls were gray cement, the air stale, the hush intentional she'd asked for. Neither a lawyer nor answers, she simply waited. Captain Yarrow observed her behind. The mirrored panel, discomfort prickling. His spine Tro had ordered no questioning, not yet, just surveillance. But it wasn't espionage that rattled Yarrow, it was her poise, her calm, as if being caught was part of her scheme. President Tro walked in alone, no guards, no cameras, just him, a dossier under his arm and a nation's burden in his eyes. Claire lifted her gaze, folding her hands like a hostess. "You've been busy," he said, dropping the folder with a thud. Photos spilled out, charred. Military trucks razed towns, tapped calls. Satellite pings, her movements traced. Like a warpath, she looked briefly, then back at him. "Those weren't my calls," she said evenly. Tro leaned forward. "Then whose were they?" Claire gave no reply, instead slid a thin envelope from her sleeve across the desk. Yarrow tightened behind the glass. Tro unsealed it. Inside, murky yet clear images, a covert meeting between a French energy tycoon, a Sahel warlord, and a man bearing European peacekeeper insignia. "You were never the mark," Claire murmured. "You were the peace." Trey's jaw locked. Things were clicking. She wasn't feeding intel to France, she was tearing through it, and maybe, just maybe, setting it ablaze. He studied her in silence, then asked the question that had haunted him. "Why me?" Claire breathed out. "Because you're the one they never counted on to make it this far." The envelope stayed with Tro for 12 hours untouched. He sealed it in a steel case, dismissed his staff, and called in only one man, Colonel Fawana, chief of counterintel, a soldier who earned his trust in foxholes, not corridors. By dawn, a second report lay open on his desk, thicker, dirtier, not Claire Morrow, who was rogue, but the mission she'd infiltrated exposed exchanges between France's military attaché and a Paris oil firm, outlining plans to destabilize the Sahel, not for war, for contracts. They fed rebellion to bait governments into unfair mining deals, offered arms for minerals under guise of aid. The rebels weren't enemies, they were assets, curated chaos, and Claire was in it. To monitor, yes, but also to expose, and not for France, for someone else. One file stood out drone shipment manifests not signed by France but an EU relief envoy. Traoré recognized the name, shook his hand in Brussels, smiled for photos. Claire had played many sides, now the real question was whose mission she was on. That afternoon Traoré stood in the hallway of marble outside her room, hand hovering over the knob. Inside was the woman who'd lied, deceived, and slipped into his country's cracked seams, and yet she might have just revealed the real war front, the one beneath the headlines where resources bled and peace was a brand. He opened the door. Claire didn't blink. You saw the last page, she said. Traoré nodded. They're not coming to rescue you, are they? He asked. Her smile was faint. They're coming to shut us both up. Night had draped over Kudu when Traoré summoned his closest. No ministers, no aides, just Fawana Ureo and an unnamed intelligence officer whose identity was never written. The room dim, the table bare except for the envelope Claire had given him and a tablet showing sat feeds, logs, dates, and images too real to dismiss. She gave us the string. Traoré said the question is whether to pull it. The stakes were massive if real, and so far nothing disproved it. France had funded rebels, sacrificed Burkinabe soldiers for profit, and sway the oil, the drones, the aid. All strings pulled behind diplomacy. Fawana demanded action. We go public. Expose them, let the world see France's true hand in Africa. But Ureo objected. If we light the fire, they torch her. They'll deny it all, twist it, make her a double agent. Then they'll hit us harder this time. The unnamed man was the last to speak. Or, he continued, we use it, quietly lift the intel, rewire the board, lay traps, forge new allegiances, make them believe we're still in the dark. Traoré watched the monitor flicker. One file blinked red. A scheduled peace summit in Accra. French diplomats were attending. If they detonated the truth there, diplomatic balance across West Africa could collapse. But it could also ignite covert war. His eyes shifted toward the cell block holding Claire, then back to the circle of men. We don't just survive this, he said. We make sure no leader after me ever needs to kneel for autonomy. And with that, the battle submerged beneath the surface. The road to Jibwa was cracked, narrow, and constantly observed. Each curve passed under the watchful eyes of men without uniforms but armed like veterans. Claire rode in silence in the back of a camouflage truck, flanked by 2 intelligence agents. No handcuffs, just tension. President Traoré had made his wager, not on her innocence, but on the weight of her knowledge. The convoy halted at a derelict cotton warehouse 2 kilometers outside Jibwa. From the road, it seemed deserted, half buried in sand. But beneath it, through a straw-concealed hatch framed by corroded barrels, lay a nerve center, cold, compact, and filled with technology far beyond the region's norm. Claire led them down. Inside, screens displayed live drone feeds, heat signatures, intercepted chatter. The operators weren't rebels. They were children, some barely teenagers, some missing limbs, all bearing the hollow expressions of those who've seen too much. They worked silently, trained to watch, record, and erase from memory. In the corner, 2 men sat tied and terrified. One wore the badge of a French military contractor. The other, a supposed NGO satellite expert, carried an EU diplomatic badge in his jacket. Traoré entered last, his expression unreadable. He surveyed the room, the kids, the tech branded with false humanitarian logos, the restrained foreigners. He let the silence stretch. Claire stood beside him. This is what grows in the blind spots, she said quietly. Yarrow's voice cut the air. So what now? Traoré didn't reply immediately. Instead, he looked at the children. We show them, he said. Make the world see. And just like that, visibility became his greatest weapon. There was no pomp in the broadcast. No anthem, no flags, just President Traoré at a bare wooden table with a folder in front of him. The stream went live at 8 a.m. West Africa time. By noon, global viewers were locked in. He spoke calmly, deliberately. He never named France. But what he presented, contracts, intercepted correspondence, drone blueprints, images of child informants, made the target unmistakable. A French energy conglomerate, EU peacekeepers, Western-funded militants, all woven into a web of subterfuge, aiming to extract and manipulate Burkina Faso. Then came the twist. He introduced Claire Morrow, not as a defector, but a witness. Her face pale, her demeanor composed, she read a prepared statement. She admitted to espionage. She confessed to breaching protocols. But she claimed everything changed the moment she saw children turned into expendable instruments of war. I was sent to collect data, she said, voice unwavering. But I stayed to reveal the machine that trained me. Global networks scrambled. France denied involvement. EU officials demanded answers. Protests erupted in Paris and Lyon. Across Africa, reactions varied. Some leaders hesitated. Others were stirred. Calls for a Pan-African tribunal began. In Ouagadougou, people poured into the streets. Not in rage, but in stunned respect. For the first time in generations, a head of state flipped the script. Not through pleas or secrecy, but by facing the world and daring it to look away. After the broadcast, Traoré left without a statement. No declarations, no grandstanding. Just silence. And in that silence, a new message thundered. Burkina Faso would no longer be anyone's chess piece. And this time, the players heard it. Claire Morrow vanished the following day. No convoy. No flight logs. No escorts. Just an empty holding cell and a folded note. Truth is never safe. Asked at a press event, Traoré didn't elaborate. He only stared into the cameras and said, "She gave us the key. That's all that matters." Behind closed doors, geopolitical shockwaves grew. France pulled several envoys citing security reviews. 8 agencies withdrew discreetly. But beneath that retreat, a deeper shift was underway. In Mali, Niger, Chad, young visionaries invoked Traoré's words not as rebellion, but as a blueprint. Intelligence began flowing across new channels. Old alliances wavered. Covert coalitions took root. And in the market stalls of Ouagadougou, people didn't discuss diplomats. They talked about the boys in Djibouti, surrounded by wires and war. About the French operative who exposed her own country. But above all, they spoke of Traoré. How he didn't blink when truth stood at the gate. How he invited the storm. Military outposts saw graffiti appear, not a pawn, scrawled across school walls. On lips of vendors and elders alike, a question emerged. Not with fear, but hope. How many more shadows hide truths just waiting for someone to bring them to light? Because while headlines argued over sanctions, denials, and power plays, in Burkina Faso, one thing was already certain. The board had changed. And this time, Africa moved first.